few months ago, a world pandemic, the corona, started and forced us to adjust to a little different reality than we used to. Because of social distancing and because we need to stay away from each other and, in extreme cases, to stay inside our houses, but still need to have a function in life, we found ourselves using Zoom and FaceTime and have to use different media platforms in order to stay in touch with the outside world, if it's friends, if it's family, co-workers. And this reality was extremely hard for the older generation that was born in an era of limited media platforms available to him. And in this presentation, I will present Ziv Levy, who is 57 years old, who works with children as an educator. He works with them on the abilities of language and leadership. And in this interview and presentation, he will tell us how was it like to reinvent himself during this time as an educator using Zoom, something that he was very unfamiliar with just a short time ago.
The pandemic, I entered it on March, and I lost all of my customers on one day. The parents called me up and say, listen, we have no jobs, schools are closed, please return our money back. That's what they were saying.
Yes.
And I was in the middle of a crisis. That's the way I can describe it. And step by step, I collected some students that were allowed, or they were enforced by their parents to be taught by Zoom. And I developed my Zoom skills, which means how I approach them, how I talk to them, my voice, my facial gestures, all kind of new stuff that I had to study in my old age. I'm not that young. Changes are not so easy. However, because I'm very verbal, and because I have kind of a dramatic skills, I was able to gather a lot of kids. And nowadays, I teach around 100 students in my Zoom program. I teach basically the material that I taught before, and I see prosperity in it. And I was just about to lose my money and to lose my job and to be abandoned on the sidewalks. But I don't know how, because I'm not a technological person. I'm quite technophobic. Mm-hmm. I manage to get me students and to do what I do best, to teach.
The 60s and the 70s were decades where music really developed. And with that, sound recording became available to many people around the world and brought people together. On 1960, music festivals, such as Woodstock, became popular. Woodstock was a rock festival in 1969 in New York. It's considered to be a very outstanding rock festival from the 60s, and as a very social event that was shaped a whole generation in the West world and in the USA. In the 70s, music becomes much more experimental because artists had more freedom to create their pieces because of more technological availability and progress. On the next slide, we will listen to Ziv telling us about what it was like to grow up in the 70s and what kind of music he was listening to.
I was listening to a lot of Queen, a lot of Leonard Cohen, Simon and Garfunkel. I had like all kind of music that came from the US and was a good music, Led Zeppelin, stuff like this. I adore them. And it was, we got everything right away. The way it was published or got out in the US, we got it like the day after. And I adore them.
And tell me, what was, were there any kind of music you weren't supposed to listen to at home?
No. I know that there were times in Israel that, for example, the Beatles was prohibited because of the prime minister. He said that they corrupt the youth. I don't know why, because the Beatles music is beautiful. Me myself, I had no problem. There was no censorship, whatsoever.
I see, but you know of people that were forbidden from listening to.
Yeah, in earlier times.
Mm-hmm.
I think Israel is quite developed in terms of letting you hear all kind of influences from the West, from the East. They don't really disturb you to develop yourself in terms of music.
Mm-hmm. And when you wanted to buy a record, when you want to purchase a record, where did you buy it and how much did it cost?
This is funny because it raises memories. First of all, I had to work for money. My mom and my dad wouldn't give me money for records.
Mm-hmm.
I had to work for it.
Of course.
There was like a little store in the middle of Rishon LeZion, the place where I grew.
Where you grew up, yep.
Yeah, where I grew up, and it called the Music Alley, Simtata Musica, the Music Alley.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to go over there, sometimes with no money, just to listen to music, and then, well, I think about it.
So it was
and
more like
I had money,
like a social setting as well. Young people went to listen to music and be together and hang out.
Yeah, it was a very small store. If you picture to yourself like a large store with all kinds of people inside, no. You can stack in maybe 5 or 4, people, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
But
that was enough for you then.
Excuse me?
That was good enough for you back then.
That was good enough for me. It was a very small store, very romantic, and this is a very precious memory that I have. First of all, when I was young, I'm not young, when I was very, very, very little, like around 4 or 5 years old, there was a very famous program in the radio. It was called The Cat in Boots. Cat in Boots.
Mm-hmm.
And they were giving their songs and stories and all kind of stuff, very educational.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to wait every day till 4 o'clock when they had like maybe 1 hour show, and it was my precious hour in the day. So I loved radio because when I was young, it was let's say a tool of socialization, because I was socialized by it. It was very important to my development. Beautiful stories, beautiful songs, a lot of interpersonal relationship between the characters in the story. And this is something that affects you. I believe that things that are within me now have base and roots in this special program when I was very young. It affected me a lot.
When the television was invented, it was a great deal for the world because it helped us keep in touch with what was happening around us, if it's news stories or if it's news, local news or news around the world. It gave access to information that was essential for us as people and as a society. In 1975, color television became available, and it was a great deal because not only people were able to watch color television, it was also was a social status and something that not everybody could afford, and it was a big deal, and it created a lot of change in the world. In this slide, Ziv will tell us about his experience with television and color television, and what was it like to watch color television for the first time.
First of all, when I was like around 10 years old, we had no TV. No TV, just radio. And we got our first TV, and then after something like 3 or 4 years, there was a color TV. And only the rich people could afford a color TV. And I was remembering myself waiting and waiting and waiting for a color TV. And when my father got one, it was one of the happiest days of my life. Of course, after 2 or 3 days, you get used to it and you don't remember that once TV was black and white. Mm-hmm. But it was a very, very like crucial moment for me. Not only the TV, but you know, something like a social status that we, like others, have color TV. It was very important. It meant a lot. And then, you know, programs were developing, and I remember basically a lot of programs from the US, which I used to watch.
Can you give me some examples?
Yes, but I will have to remember. There was Roger Moore, Roger Moore, he was a hero, like the program called The Angel. The Angel. There was a crippled man on a wheelchair, like a detective, Aaron Side. They were all given names. Colombo, who was an American-Italian detective. A lot of, and then, you know, like Dallas with JR. And this is something that I remember very vigorously, because in the program, someone shot JR. And no one knows who shot him. And it was like a big deal in our country. People would ask themselves, who shot JR? And they were guessing and trying to bring all kind of hypotheses. Eventually, we got the answer, but it was something, you got into a store, you got into a grocery, people would ask, who shot JR? It was like a mystery.
So you think it's something that connecting people together, kind of create maybe a conversation topic around the neighborhood or something. Everybody had their TV at home, and then you go and you talk about it with your friends, with your neighbors.
I will tell you something which is very complicated. Today, when I'm not young and I'm more educated and I'm more like matured, I don't like TV, which means I can consume sports because I love it. I would not be able to watch programs of detectives and stuff like this as I did in the past. I think TV is kind of corrupting our souls. I don't like most of the things that they give over there. I don't like realities. I think it's time consumer, and it prevents you from doing other stuff, which is living, which is be able to fulfill yourself. I'm trying not to be a lot near the television. I told you before, I'm a sports addict, and this is my only fault. However, I know that people, even nowadays, you get into a place, people talk about, you know, like reality shows and what happened yesterday in one of the chapters. So it brings people together. I have to say that it is very low in terms of level or, you know, educational stuff.
Movies created a lot of change in the world in terms of the content they deliver and the places movie can come true. For example, movies from the US, from Hollywood, were arriving to all over the world, to small countries like Israel, like all over Europe, and it created a process of globalization and culture spreading all over the world. Movies inspired people. They made them dream about getting to certain places one day. And on this slide, Ziv will tell us how movies inspired him to move from Israel to New York and to have a life in New York.
First of all, I belong to the generation that adores Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta in Grease, the movie Grease.
Mhm.
So I watched it like 10 times in the theater, over and over and over again. And we used to dance like him, and we used to get dressed like him, and the girls were dressed like Olivia Newton-John. And it was, you know, sweet days and very innocent. Now I look backwards and I laugh because it looks funny, all this dancing, moving and stuff like this. And it's not sophisticated. It's not saturated with wisdom. It's easy. It's simple. But when I was 16, I believed that that was enough. But I have like romantic memories from this era.
I see. I watched Grease as well in my young age, and I think it's a classic and a great movie. Just a fun movie to watch.
Okay.
So, can you tell me, in terms of globalization, how do you feel like the movies, as you said, Grease, or you know, movies that came from the USA or from other countries to Israel, to a small country, how do you feel like it affects globalization in terms of culture and your social life?
Okay. Wow. This is quite
This is a big question.
a big question. Yes, I have to reflect and I have to think again. Well, first of all, a great admiration for United States because everything happens in New York. So when you see the movie Taxi Driver with Judy Foster, and when you see even I forgot the name. Many movies were taking place in New York. So I always had in mind I have to go to New York. And then right after I finished the army service, something like, you know, maybe like 2 or 3 months, I went to New York and I started working over there. And I was registered as a student, a psychology student in Queens College.
Mhm.
And every Saturday, I was living in Queens, but every Saturday and Friday, when I went to New York, being in Central Park, which is something that I saw only in the movies, it meant a lot to me. Seeing the building where John Lennon was living in, looking at the bar when Woody Allen plays music every Thursday night. This is classical. This is something that, you know, for example, I knew that a great singer by the name of Billy Joel lives in New York. So I would walk in New York and I say, wow, maybe I'll meet Billy Joel over here. He was one of the heroes of my childhood. So first of all, it made me,
yeah.
First of all, it made me, it gave me a lot of, I wanted to go to New York. It was very important to me. So I spent some years over there.
And it was important for you because of the time is spent watching movies about New York, watching TV shows about New York, and this was something that really influenced you. Just watching it through the different media platforms, you just knew you have to go there.
Yes, yes, and it also like how would I say it? It also set my mind in terms of what kind of person would I like to be. Um, so because of the fact that I'm a man, when you see Clint Eastwood in westerns and in other stuff, you adore him and you feel a lot of great feeling towards him, and it made me more of a global person. I believe in social rights. I believe in all the stuff that Hollywood made me believe in. Because usually when you see films from Hollywood, it concerns people and minorities and blacks and whites and all kind of things that were in the American society, and I was influenced by it as well. And we also have minorities in Israel, so you take the model you saw over there and you put it here, and then you become I would say a humanistic person.